I funded my sister's wedding, then discovered I wasn't even on the guest list. When I confronted her, she rolled her eyes and declared, "You at my wedding? You'd just embarrass me like always." So I contacted one vendor, then another. By dusk, the venue was vacant. The food never arrived, and guests were posting photos of an empty ballroom. I, 32M, never thought I'd be the type of person to destroy someone's wedding day. But sometimes life pushes you to a breaking point you never knew existed. My sister has always been the golden child. While I struggled through community college and worked 2 jobs to make ends meet, she glided through life with our parents' unwavering support and endless praise. When she announced her engagement 6 months ago, the entire family erupted in celebration. The wedding planning began immediately, and somehow, I found myself becoming the unofficial financier of her dream day. It started small. She mentioned the venue required a deposit, and our parents were stretched thin after Dad's recent surgery. I offered to cover it, $1,500 that I'd been saving for months. Then came the photographer, another $2,000. The florist needed payment up front, so did the caterer. Each time, she'd call with that sweet voice she reserved for asking favors, explaining how this wedding meant everything to her and how she'd pay me back once they were settled. By last month, I'd contributed over $12,000 to her wedding. My savings account was nearly empty, but seeing her happiness felt worth it. She'd hug me and say I was the best brother in the world, that she couldn't do this without me. Our parents praised my generosity, calling me selfless and devoted. 3 weeks before the wedding, I asked her about my +1 situation. I'd been seeing someone for 4 months, nothing serious, but I wanted to bring her to the family celebration. My sister paused, looking uncomfortable, and told me she'd get back to me about the seating arrangements. 2 weeks passed. No response about my date. When I brought it up again, she seemed irritated and said the guest list was already finalized. Fine, I thought. I'd go alone and celebrate my sister's big day. Last Tuesday, exactly 1 week before the wedding, I was having coffee with our cousin when she mentioned how excited she was about Saturday's ceremony. She pulled out her phone to show me her dress options and casually asked if I'd received my invitation yet. My blood went cold. I told her I hadn't gotten anything in the mail, but maybe it was delayed. She looked confused and showed me the beautiful invitation on her phone, elegant script, expensive paper, the works. Then she pulled up the wedding website and scrolled through the guest list. My name wasn't there. I sat in that coffee shop, staring at her phone, feeling like someone had punched me in the chest. Every family member was listed. Distant relatives I barely knew. College friends, work colleagues, even her ex-boyfriend's mother who she'd stayed close with. But not me. The brother who'd funded this entire celebration wasn't even invited to attend. I drove straight to her apartment. She was home, surrounded by wedding favors and centerpieces, looking radiant and excited. When I asked about my invitation, her face immediately shifted. She became defensive, saying she'd been meaning to talk to me about it. She explained that she wanted an elegant, sophisticated wedding, the kind of event that would photograph well and impress her new in-laws. She'd worked so hard to create the perfect guest list, filled with people who would enhance the atmosphere she was trying to create. Then came the words that shattered whatever relationship we had left. She told me I would just embarrass her like I always did. My job at the auto repair shop, my community college education, my inability to make small talk with her fiancé's wealthy family. None of it fit the image she wanted to project. She rolled her eyes as she said it, like I was being dramatic for even bringing it up. I asked about the money I'd given her. She shrugged and said I'd offered it freely, that she never asked me to pay for anything. It was my choice to be generous, and now I was trying to use it as leverage to force my way into her wedding. I left without another word. That night, I sat in my apartment, looking at my bank statements. $12,347. Nearly 2 years of careful saving gone. All for a sister who considered me too embarrassing to include in her special day. But I wasn't just angry. I was methodical. I started with the caterer. I'd paid their deposit and half the total cost up front. When I called Thursday morning, I explained there had been a family emergency and we needed to cancel the catering services. The contract was in my name since I'd made the payments. They were understanding, though they kept the deposit as per their cancellation policy. The photographer was next. Same story. Family emergency, need to cancel. Since I'd made the payments, they processed the cancellation. Another deposit lost, but the majority of my money refunded. The florist was trickier. They'd already prepared most of the arrangements. But when I explained the situation and showed them that all payments had come from my account, they agreed to cancel the order. The flowers would be donated to a local hospital instead. Friday afternoon, I called the venue. This was the big one. The reception hall, the ceremony space, everything was booked under my payment information. I told them about the family emergency requiring immediate cancellation. The manager was sympathetic but firm about their no-refund policy for cancellations less than 2 weeks out. I didn't care about the money anymore. By Friday evening, I'd systematically canceled every vendor I'd personally paid. The only things remaining were the small details our parents had covered and whatever she'd managed to pay for herself. I didn't sleep Friday night. Part of me felt sick about what I'd done, but the larger part felt vindicated. She'd used me, discarded me, and then dismissed my feelings like they didn't matter. Now she'd learned the consequences of treating people like they're disposable. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly. I stayed home, ignoring the dozens of calls and texts flooding my phone. Around noon, I finally answered when our mother called for the 10th time. She was hysterical, screaming about how I destroyed the wedding. How could I be so vindictive? How I'd embarrassed the entire family. I let her vent, then calmly explained what had happened. The missing invitation, the cruel words, the years of being treated like a second-class family member. She went quiet. Then she asked if I was sure about the invitation. I told her to check with my sister herself. The calls kept coming throughout the day. My sister, crying and begging me to fix everything. Her fiancé, furious and threatening legal action. Various relatives, some supportive, others horrified. I turned my phone off around 3 in the afternoon. That evening, I checked social media. The photos were exactly what I'd expected. An empty ballroom with just the basic decorations the venue provided. Cohen cousin had posted a photo of the dessert table, just the wedding cake, surrounded by empty space where elaborate floral arrangements should have been. The caption read, "Most awkward wedding ever. No food, no flowers, no music." What happened? Another post showed guests leaving early, with someone commenting that they'd driven 3 hours for what turned out to be a 15-minute ceremony, followed by nothing. The reception hall had been completely empty except for basic chairs and tables. Update 1. Sunday morning, I finally turned my phone back on. 73 missed calls, countless texts ranging from supportive to absolutely vicious. The family was split down the middle. My uncle, who'd never liked my sister's entitled attitude, sent a long text saying he was proud of me for standing up for myself. Several cousins admitted they'd always thought she treated me poorly. But others were furious, saying I'd gone too far, that revenge was never the answer. My parents requested a family meeting. When I arrived at their house Sunday evening, my sister was already there, red-eyed and exhausted. She'd spent the weekend trying to salvage some kind of celebration, but it was too late. The damage was done. She looked at me with pure hatred and accused me of ruining the most important day of her life. I reminded her that she'd told me I wasn't important enough to be part of it in the first place. Our father, who'd been silent until then, asked her directly about the guest list. She became defensive, saying she had limited space, that she had to make difficult choices. When he pressed her about whether I was ever actually invited, she broke down and admitted the truth. The room went quiet. Our mother, who'd been calling me selfish and vindictive all weekend, suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. Our father looked disgusted, not with me, but with what his daughter had become. My sister tried to justify it again, talking about the image she wanted to create, about her new in-laws' expectations. But now it sounded hollow and cruel, even to our parents. Her new husband, who'd been mostly quiet, finally spoke up. He said he'd assumed I was choosing not to attend, that she'd told him I was uncomfortable at formal events. He looked genuinely shocked to learn I'd never been invited, especially after contributing so much money. That's when my sister made her biggest mistake. She screamed that it was her wedding, her choice, and that I had no right to force myself into her life just because I'd thrown money at her problems. She said I'd always been jealous of her success, and that this was just another example of me trying to drag her down. Our father stood up and told her to leave. He said he was ashamed of the person she'd become and that she owed me more than just money. She owed me an apology and a complete change in attitude. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, her husband trailing behind, looking embarrassed and confused. Update 2. It's been 2 weeks since the wedding disaster. The family fallout has been intense, and ongoing. My sister hasn't spoken to me directly, but she's been posting passive-aggressive social media updates about toxic family members and people who can't handle other people's success. She's painted herself as the victim of a jealous, vindictive brother who destroyed her happiness out of spite. Some extended family members have bought into her narrative. They see the canceled wedding as disproportionate revenge and think I went too far. I've been uninvited from a few upcoming family events, which honestly doesn't bother me much anymore. But the core family reaction has been different than I expected. Our parents, after the initial shock and anger, have been surprisingly supportive. They've started seeing patterns in my sister's behavior that they'd previously ignored or excused. Our mother admitted she'd always known my sister looked down on me, but thought it was just sibling rivalry that she'd outgrow. Seeing it laid out so clearly, the missing invitation, the cruel dismissal, the years of taking my generosity for granted, had opened their eyes. My father has been the most transformed. He called last Tuesday and apologized for enabling my sister's entitled behavior for so many years. He said he'd been so proud of her achievements that he'd overlooked how she treated people who didn't serve her interests. The financial aftermath has been complicated. My sister's new husband, who seems like a decent guy caught in an impossible situation, reached out privately. He offered to pay me back the money I'd lost in deposits and cancellation fees. He said he felt terrible about the whole situation and that he'd had no idea how I'd been treated. I appreciated the gesture, but declined. The money wasn't the real issue anymore. It was about respect and basic human decency. My sister did eventually have a small reception 3 weeks later. Her husband's family paid for it, and from what I heard, it was nice, but nothing like the elaborate celebration she'd originally planned. The photos looked lovely, but you could see the tension in everyone's faces. A few family members who attended told me she kept making comments about how much better the original wedding would have been, how I'd stolen her dream day from her. She apparently spent most of the evening bitter and resentful instead of celebrating her new marriage. The strangest part has been the reaction from people outside the family. Word spread through social media and mutual friends about what happened. Opinion has been sharply divided. Some people think I'm a hero for standing up to entitled family members who take advantage of generosity. Others think I'm petty and cruel for targeting something as important as a wedding day. The story has taken on a life of its own, with people debating it online and using it as an example of family drama gone wrong. Update 3. A month has passed, and the dust is finally starting to settle. The immediate family dynamic has permanently changed, and I'm honestly okay with that. My relationship with my parents has actually improved. They've been making more effort to include me in things and have stopped making excuses for my sister's behavior. We had a long conversation last weekend where they acknowledged that they'd failed both of us, me by not protecting me from years of dismissive treatment, and her by not teaching her to value the people who cared about her. My sister's marriage seems to be struggling. According to our cousin, she's been complaining that her husband doesn't understand why she's still upset about the wedding. She expected him to be angrier at me, to demand that I be cut out of family events completely. Instead, he's been questioning whether she really values the relationships in her life or just what people can do for her. He apparently told her that if she could dismiss her own brother so easily, someone who'd sacrificed financially for her happiness, then he worried about how she'd treat him if he ever disappointed her. It's caused serious tension between them. Last week, something unexpected happened. I got a call from the photographer I'd canceled. She said she'd been thinking about the situation and wanted to offer me something. She'd kept some of the engagement photos she'd taken of my sister and her fiancé, and she had an idea. She offered to do a free photo session for me. Not engagement photos, since I'm single, but professional headshots for my LinkedIn profile and maybe some casual portraits. She said she'd been moved by the whole situation and wanted to do something positive. It was a small gesture, but it meant more to me than she probably realized. Someone had seen my story and chosen to respond with kindness instead of judgment. I've been doing a lot of thinking about what I learned from all this. For years, I'd accepted being treated as the lesser sibling, the one who wasn't quite good enough but was useful for certain things. I told myself it was just family dynamics, that blood was thicker than water, that I should be grateful to be included at all. But what I realized is that family isn't just about shared genetics. It's about mutual respect, care, and consideration. My sister had never seen me as family in that sense. I was just a resource to be used when convenient and dismissed when I didn't fit her plans. The revenge felt satisfying in the moment, and I don't regret it entirely. She needed to face consequences for treating people as disposable. But the real victory wasn't in ruining her wedding day. It was in finally seeing myself as someone who deserved better treatment and being willing to enforce that boundary. Confused guests milling around in formal wear, checking their phones. My sister in her wedding dress, looking lost and devastated. I've started setting clearer limits with people in my life. When friends ask for favors or loans, I'm more careful about making sure the relationship is reciprocal. When family members make dismissive comments, I speak up instead of just accepting it. My sister and I may never have a real relationship again, and I'm at peace with that. Some bridges, once burned, aren't worth rebuilding. But I've learned that sometimes you have to be willing to lose relationships that weren't really serving you anyway. The money I lost on her wedding has actually been replaced faster than I expected. Without the constant drain of her emergencies and requests for help, I've been able to save more consistently. I'm already back to where I was financially, and for the first time in years, I know that money is truly mine to do with as I choose. As for my sister, I hope she eventually learns something from this experience. I hope she realizes that treating people well isn't just about being nice. It's about recognizing that everyone deserves basic respect and consideration. But whether she learns that lesson or not isn't my responsibility anymore. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is show people that there are consequences for treating others badly. Even if it costs you something in the short term, it's worth it to maintain your self-respect and dignity. I funded my sister's wedding because I loved her and wanted her to be happy. She excluded me because she was embarrassed by who I am. In the end, we both got what we deserved. If you'd like to see more stories like this, a gentle tap on the subscribe button would mean the world to us.